Hello guys, this is the Perpetuating Party of Patriots, and this video is going to be the 400 subscriber special, which I finally decided to plan, and now I'm gonna make. I had pretty much really no idea what to do for this special, so I decided on a ranking video. And today, I'm going to be ranking all of the PlayStation 2 Dragon Ball Z games. Now, this isn't like a top 10 list or a tier list video. I'm basically just to go by each of the Dragon Ball Z games that were released on PS2. There's 9 of them, and basically give my thoughts on them. Now, surprisingly, I actually really like most of these games. I think most of them are pretty fun and pretty solid games to play overall. But yeah, I guess I don't, this is my opinion, obviously. So if you disagree, feel free to state your opinions in the comments. But anyways, well, we're gonna start from bottom to top, and and now to go into the video, and I'm gonna give my thoughts on what the worst Dragon Ball Z PS2 game is. And the worst Dragon Ball Z game that was released on PS2 is no real shocker to those who've probably played it. Dragon Ball Z Sagas. Yeah, now I don't completely hate Dragon Ball Z Sagas like some people do, but yeah, it's not really that good at all. But yeah, basically what this one is this is probably like the most unique game on the list, because it is not a fighting game. It is a basically a linear beat 'em up in pretty much all reality. Yeah, now I think the concept of a Dragon Ball Z beat 'em up game with co-op sounds pretty fun. Fortunately, they didn't really execute it all that well. Yeah, I guess one of the main reasons why I didn't really like this game that much in retrospect is it's just not really all that satisfying to play, in my opinion. And the combos don't really differ all that much, but and yeah, and also the super moves are OP as shit in this one, and yeah, pretty pretty much all you really need to do is just spam the fuck out of the super moves, and you pretty much win based on that. And even the villains know that because they'll spam the fuck out of supers too. And one of the things that I also really didn't like about this game is how flying was handled. Yeah, you can't really adjust how you fly. You didn't only fly up to where you start flying from, so yeah, I think that causes quite a bit of backtracking in the levels, especially if you want to get Z coins, which I think you mainly need for upgrades, which is very fun, definitely. And some of the missions in this game can be straight up bullshit, like the Dende escort mission. That was a pain in the ass, and this game is also pretty glitchy. It's not straight up unplayable levels of glitchy, but there are some pretty infamous glitches in this one, like when you're playing multiplayer with when you have to play as Goku against Frieza. Yeah, both players control Goku for some reason, well, parts of him, and yeah, that got pretty glitchy. And also the fight where you got to protect Goku from Dr. Gero. That there's just a straight up glitch where even if you destroy Android 19, Dr. Gero will just stand there firing away at him, and yeah, apparently that happens a decent chunk of the time sometimes. And one thing that usually I'm not very hard on, but in for these types of games I do think is an issue, is none of the characters really play that differently, and I'd say that mainly sucks for beat 'em ups because I mean that gives you really no honestly really no point in trying to, well, you can't even select the characters you want to play as, so it's not even that big of an issue in the regular story mode. But for multiplayer, you're pretty much just playing the same character. The only difference is for characters like Broly, he's just sort of fucking overpowered considering he's in Super Saiyan mode. But yeah, but anyways, enough talk about Dragon Ball Z sagas. Let's move on to the number 8 spot. And coming in at the number 8 spot, we have the first Dragon Ball Z Budokai. Now, despite it being very low on this list, I do not hate Dragon Ball Z Budokai, and I do think, all things considered, it is at least a decent game. Although, I gotta be honest, it's not aged that well, honestly, and now time to talk about, well, first we're going to start off with its positives. The first of the positives, and the biggest one, well, this is probably expected, but it has a very good story mode, and I think it told the story pretty well. Now, obviously, there are some things they need to cut out. Like, it mainly focuses on just the action parts of Dragon Ball Z, but it still told its story well enough. And yeah, while the graphics aren't necessarily the greatest, the cutscenes were pretty fun to watch. And yeah, I just really liked the cutscenes, but yeah, and I do like this format of story mode for Dragon Ball Z, basically just fight after fight after fight. It is a bit repetitive, but it works, in my opinion. Now, on to the gameplay, which this is definitely one of the simplest Dragon Ball Z fighting games, especially compared to the ones now, or the ones that would come later, but yeah, it is a very simple game to learn. Now, I'm not saying everything has to be overly complex, but there's not a whole lot you really have to learn to be that good at the game. If it's just the regular AI, if you know how to spam it, just punch, 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 energy attack, and then you perform a Kamehameha attack move. And unfortunately, you can't fire Kamehameha attack moves on the fly. You have to do that punching at the air stuff. But yeah, that issue was fixed in later games. But yeah, it's not great when the only real way you could use the Kamehameha moves effectively is up close and point blank. But yeah, now it's not entirely easy in terms of just in general, because the story mode definitely gets very hard once it gets to the later parts of the story. But yeah, it's not really that hard to learn now. Now it's not entirely a negative, because while yes, the game is very simple, it at least controls well, so it's not like it's clunky or anything. And again, it is a fast game at least, so it has that going for it too. But yeah, just my main issue with the first Budokai, it was the first, but yeah, compared to the later ones, it is a very simple game to learn. But I like the story mode, and I also like the extra Legend of Hercule mode. I thought that was a very fun mode, mainly because of the cutscenes with Hercule, and I just fucking love Hercule. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about the first Budokai game. Uh, yeah, not bad, but it's pretty weak compared to the later games. Anyways, let's move on to the number 7 spot. And coming in at the number 7 spot, we have Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 1. Now, I feel like I've been a little bit hard on this game in the past, and I think I have kind of overhated it a bit. Because, yeah, I kind of just came to the realization of things that I'll talk about in a minute. But let's, of course, start off with the positives of the game. Firstly, it has one of the best intros of any Dragon Ball Z game ever, and that is something I will give it. It has a very cool intro with very cool animation, and it's very action-packed, and it's just a fun intro to watch. And, yeah, another positive of the game is, like with Budokai 1, the story mode. Now, it does kind of follow a little bit of a similar format to Budokai 1's story mode, mainly how the fights are, where it's usually just fight after fight after fight with cutscenes. But one thing that is very cool about Tenkaichi 1's story mode is you actually get branching pathways, and you don't have to solely play as one character for each story fight. And yeah, for example, like the training battles when the Z fighters are going on the Kami's lookout, you can just beat one fight. You don't have to play through every single one of them. And I thought that was pretty cool. And it is a fun story mode to go through. However, this is here comes the flaws of the game, in my opinion, and it's kind of with it's kind of a similar issue to Budokai 1, and it hasn't aged very well, especially for the first 3D Arena Dragon Ball Z game. Now, I do think it does have at least a bit more complexity than Budokai 1 does, but compared to Tenkaichi 2 and 3, there's not really a whole lot going on. There's a lot of the fighting pretty much just boils down to, hey, well, I don't know why the fuck I opened it up with that, but basically just punch, 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 punch. Enemy falls down, they get back up, and either they do it back or you keep doing it again. And yeah, this issue mainly comes for if you're fighting the AI. Like obviously, if you have a friend, it could be different. But yeah, very simple and very repetitive gameplay from this one. Now, I do like aspects of the gameplay. Well, obviously you have the merit of actually getting to fly around like you're in Dragon Ball Z. I think that's a very cool aspect of the game. And like I said, I do really like the story mode. And another thing I like about this game is the ultimate battle mode. That's aside from the story mode, that's probably the best part of the game. And the customization I thought was very cool. Now, unfortunately, you can't customize your moves, but you can customize your stats, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, I think the ultimate battle mode is probably the best part of the game, honestly, or at least one of them. And the story mode, it's all recycled music from the Budokai games, but I'm not complaining. It sounds good. But anyways, that's all I really have to say about Tenkaichi 1. I do think it is a decent game, again, but again, like with the first Budokai compared to its sequels, it hasn't aged well. But anyways, let's continue with the next game. And coming in at the number 6 spot, we have an arcade port of, a game that was originally released in the arcades and was ported to the PlayStation 2. We have Super Dragon Ball Z. Very original name, am I right? I just kind of take back partially what I said about Sagas being the most unique game on this list. Of all the Dragon Ball Z fighting games, not just in general, but on the PlayStation 2, this is probably one of the most different Dragon Ball Z fighting games. It does not really play like either the Budokai games or the Tenkaichi games. It's kind of its own little thing, and I think it's a fun game. Well, obviously, let's start off with the positives of the game. I think the game looks. I know I haven't really talked about the graphics much in the games, but I think the graphics honestly look pretty cool. It kind of has a bit of a cel-shaded art style, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And another thing I have to say about the game is it is a pretty hard game to learn, or it's surprisingly pretty complex, not gonna lie. And it was developed by some of the developers for Street Fighter 2. I just figured I'd mention that. But yeah, it not only it's kind of its own little thing in terms of its gameplay, but it's a pretty technical game to learn. And I'm not very good at it, but it's also a fun and pretty satisfying game to play. Not gonna lie, but yeah, all this segment is gonna be shorter. But now on to the cons of the game. Now, I guess a bit of a con with the game is it's not very pick up and play friendly. Like, it's not very newer player friendly where you could pick up and play it, which does kind of suck. And there's not really a story mode in this game. Well, I mean, it is an arcade ported game, but yeah, all you really get is the arcade mode and unlocking every character and getting every pretty much customizable item. But yeah, it's a pretty fun game. Not gonna lie, I do think it is pretty good. But yeah, I think the next 5 are even better than this one. But anyways, now on to the top 5, which we'll start with number 5. And coming in at the number 5 spot, we have Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2. Now, yeah, I know a lot of people tend to say that this game is not that much different from the first Budokai game, and when it comes to the basic fighting, it's not that much different, but what this game brought in to the game, I thought was very appreciated. Well, first we'll start off with the positives. Firstly, I really like the way this game looks. Again, kind of like how I described Super Dragon Ball Z, it has a very cel-shaded art style, and I think it looks really good, honestly. I think it has very good graphics and very nice looking ones. And the next thing I have to say positively about the game is the soundtrack. Now, it does carry a lot of tracks over from Budokai 1, but what about the new tracks in this game I think are very cool. It went for a more jazz-oriented feel, which I like jazz, so yeah, I think it sounds pretty good in this game. And another thing that this game does better than the first is it actually brings in Boo Saga characters, like it's the Supreme Kai, Deborah, all the versions of Majin Buu, Videl, and other characters, and it also brings in fusions and Patara characters, which I think is very appreciated, and particularly on the grounds of the fusion characters, they bring in surprisingly quite a bit of strategy to the game. It is a very strategic one, and yeah, I just like that there's actually some complexity to the game. It's not kind of overly simple, but yeah. Now on to the flaws of the game, which it did rectify most of the problems that I had with Budokai 1, but it also brought in some new problems, which I gotta start with this one first, and I don't see many people talk about it, which kind of sucks, but yeah, now I hear people give games like Ultimate Tenkaichi, and some people give Budokai 3 shit for having RNG or rock, paper, scissors type modes or sequences, and uh, where are those people for Budokai 2? Because, yeah, they did alter the moves, and a couple of them really worked, like, specifically the ones for the ultimate attacks and the ones where you gotta charge up your ki blast. I think those are fine, but with stuff like the combo moves, it's literally RNG, and it's literally a rock paper scissors game. You just gotta guess what your opponent's gonna guess and try to guess differently from them. But yeah, that's mainly an issue again for the combo ultimate attacks and particularly the Patara ones, because yeah, and one aspect that I like of the Patara ones is you only really get one shot, but again, it has that RNG aspect, which I don't like. And believe it or not, the one of the issues that I have with the game is actually the story mode. Now, I will give them credit for trying something new, and that is a good thing, but they really didn't execute the story mode very well. If you're asking what it is, it's basically a board game story mode. Now, that aspect I didn't think was an issue. I actually think a Dragon Ball Z board game type story mode could work pretty well, but didn't really work well for this one. Just there's not really even any strategy to just run towards your enemy and beat the shit out of them, pretty much. Well, there's a couple of missions where that varies, but most of it's just find your enemy and beat the shit out of them. But yeah, not that great. But yeah, that's all I really have to say negatively about Budokai 2, because for the most part, I think it's a very good game, and it is better than the first one overall, in my opinion. Now, time to move on to the number 4 pick. And coming in at the number 4 spot, we have Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2. Uh, yeah, this is a big improvement over the first one, in my opinion. Yeah, I think Tenkaichi 2, this is pretty much the start of the Dragon Ball Z games that I really, really love and think are great games overall. But, yeah, let's start with the improvements that Tenkaichi 2 brought over from the first one. Well, we're just going to list the positives. Firstly, the gameplay feels much more smoother and a lot more fast-paced and fun than the first Tenkaichi. And yeah, and unlike the first one, it's not just punch, 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 enemy fall down, repeat. No, there's it's a very fast and again, it's very fluid to play and has a lot of fun stuff in it. And well, this is kind of something that I didn't mention in the first one because I kind of forgot it. You don't. Not every transformation is their own separate character, meaning you can actually transform mid-battle, which I think is very cool. And again, an issue with the first. And another thing I'd like to talk positively about the game is its soundtrack. Now, none of the songs were brought over from the Budokai games, and I think the music in Tenkaichi 2 sounds very good. Some of my favorite tracks personally are Gatebreaker, Lost Courage, and Awake. And there's a couple other ones, but those are the main ones I can think of on the top of my head. And another thing this game did really well was its story mode. This is one of the best story modes we've ever gotten in a Dragon Ball Z game, if not the best. It kind of takes aspects from I can't really describe it any other way, but basically it kind of takes aspects from Budokai 1, I guess, and Budokai 3's story mode. Well, the Budokai 3 aspect is you can actually fly around in the world of Dragon Ball Z, and where you have to find like the mission spots and stuff, and I personally like that. I like the freedom they give you in the game of getting the blast around at the speed of sound. And I guess the Budokai aspect is, well, mainly it having the way the cutscenes are told. But yeah, another aspect I do kind of like about the story mode is you kind of get to, for ones where it has multiple enemies or multiple characters, you'd basically select the order you want to start out your characters with, or select your team basically. And yeah, I think it is a very well put together story mode, and it also covers everything from pretty much Dragon Ball Z up to GT. I think it covers stuff from Dragon Ball, but not 100% sure. And another positive of this game is, while not as big as its sequel, this is still a pretty huge amount of characters to choose from. 120, if I'm not mistaken. And you also, for characters that have transformations, you actually switch through them with the left and right bumpers, which I think is a pretty convenient way of selecting your characters. But, yeah, I pretty much talked nothing but positively about the game, and honestly, there's not really a whole lot of negatives, or really any negatives I can really think of at the moment. Obviously, it's not a perfect game, but again, I don't really have much problems with it. Tenkaichi 2 is a very solid game, a very great fighter, and again, a much better game than the first one, and it's actually aged well as well. But anyways, now on to the number 3 pick. Okay, the next two, you know what, I'm just gonna cover them both here, because I can't really honestly decide which I think is better. So basically, at the number 3 and 2 spot, again, haven't decided the order, we have Budokai 3 and Infinite World. Yeah, and there's a reason why I can't really decide. One of the reasons, first we'll start off with Budokai 3 and explain the positives, and then negatives. For Budokai 3, the positives of this game is it feels a lot smoother than the first two Budokais, and it is a pretty complex game, surprisingly, for a licensed fighter. Yeah, there is a lot of strategy going on in Budokai 3 with, one aspect, I'm just start off with the positives of this aspect, or this mechanic, and then go on to my negatives with it. They introduced a new mechanic called Dragon Rush, and I'll cover the positives in this segment. One of the positives is, again, it adds more strategy, because there's multiple things you could do with it, like go into a sequence and try to activate your ultimate attack, and basically, it tells your enemy, oh fuck, gotta stay away from this guy, and you also can't abuse it, because if you keep abusing it, then you'll be out of energy, and it gives your opponent an opportunity to counterattack. Which, I like the strategic aspect of it. I do have issues with the mechanic itself, but we'll get into that later. But another positive of this game, in my opinion, is its story mode. Now, cutscene-wise, I do feel like it was a bit lazy, but kind of like how I mentioned in the Tenkaichi 2 segment, it does let you blaze around in the world of Dragon Ball, and I think that's very fun to do, and you also get quite a bit of stuff to do, and yeah, it also has an upgrade system, which I think is very well. I mean, it was also in Tenkaichi 2, but yeah, basically you can upgrade whatever you want of your fighter, like its stats, which again I think that is very cool. And another thing I like about the Budokai 3 is I don't really see many people talk about it, but I do kind of like the Dragon Arena mode, where it's basically a continuation of the level up system. And yeah, you can basically fight a fuck ton of enemies to your heart's content, pretty much. And this is also how you unlock Cybermen and Cell Jr., which I think that's pretty cool, and it gives more replay value. But, Yeah, and another thing I really like about this game is its soundtrack. Well, it's not that much different from Budokai 1 and 2 yet again, but it has the best opening song of any Dragon Ball Z game, in my opinion. Well, at least one of them, but I really, really liked the opening for this game. And now time to talk about the negatives, which now we're going to get into my negatives as a Dragon Rush thing I just mentioned. Dragon Rush, I'm not gonna lie, at points it does definitely feel like a rock paper scissors game, particularly with with the generic one you can go into by either launching a super attack or a counter attack where you teleport. But yeah, pretty much you just gotta guess what your opponent's going to do, and with two players it's even cheaper because you're basically just looking at who your opponent's controller to see what they do. Well, I mean that's kind of a human thing, but one thing that's bullshit about the AI is apparently on higher difficulties they actually read your movements, which I think is insanely. It's more bullshit, especially for Budokai 3, and especially for Dragon Ball Rush. And uh, one thing I didn't mention in any of the other segments of the fighting games on this ranking that I will mention here is the World Tournament mode. And I'm just going to be honest, I never really liked this mode. Or at one point I did, but I kind of came to realize what I didn't like about it. Now, I do kind of like it is kind of give this game's arcade mode, and it is kind of necessary for a Dragon Ball Z game, but I feel like most of the fights in this mode is just trying to get in a ring out on your opponent, and that's a very easy way to cheese the AI pretty much, or for them to ring you out. But yeah, the only real thing I really play it for is in Budokai 1 to get the two extra characters, and for the other ones just get Zenny so I could get some extra capsules and stuff or other items. But yeah, now time for Infinite World, and this is why I'm kind of tackling both of these games in one, because truthfully it's not a whole lot different from Budokai 3, but there's things that I think it improved from that one, and things that I think it did worse. Let's start off with the things I liked about Infinite World. For one, it keeps the one aspect of Dragon Rush that I liked, and that was the strategy aspect, because it kind of just has its own little hyper mode thing, where you activate a mode and then you become invincible for a while. Again, that was the one thing I did like about Dragon Rush, and thankfully they took out the RNG aspect of it. And another thing I liked was it dipped more in the GT characters, which I know people hate GT, but personally I like it, and I just like having these characters playable in the games. And this is kind of where I'm half and half on it, is the story mode. Now, I think in terms of its story mode, I think it's overall a pretty good one. There are things that I hate about it, which we'll get into the negatives in a bit, but one thing I like is the cutscenes. I think they look very, very nice. I do still kind of like Budokai 1's cutscenes the best, but I do think these are at least animated a bit better with the cel shading graphics. And, another aspect I like about the story mode is, surprisingly, again, there's actually surprisingly quite a bit of variety in this one, mainly in terms of the missions, although, unlike Budokai 2, the variety of missions could be either hit or miss. Some of them I really didn't like the one where you had to collect hexagons. I thought that was bullshit, and uh, yeah, some of these could just go eat a dick, like the one where you had to chase Goten. But another aspect of the story mode I liked was it's pretty difficult actually in terms of especially in terms of the fights. Because even on the easiest difficulty, it's pretty hard. Although I think it's kind of fairly hard. By that I mean by it's not like overly too hard, I guess. But yeah, although there was one more aspect that I liked, well, one more negative and pretty much one more thing I had to say about Infinite World that I didn't like, and they took out the beam struggles. Now I didn't mention that these were in Budokai 3, but Budokai 3 had beam struggles, and beam struggles are just cool in Dragon Ball games. Unfortunately, that got taken out, although World Tournament mode got taken out in Infinite World as well, but I didn't really like Infinite World I didn't really like World Tournament mode that much to begin with, sorry, but yeah, Beam Struggles I actually liked, and it was sad that they took them out. Oh yeah, it's also incredibly easy to do ultimate attacks, and that's something I kind of don't like, is Just push up in circle, and you can just do it if you can land it. But yeah, Budokai 3 and Infinite World, I think are both very solid fighters overall, though. Yes, I did have issues with them, but the positives outweigh the negatives by quite a bit. And I'd recommend yet another one. Unfortunately, Infinite World is a bit pricey, but I would say it is worth the money, and Budokai 3 can be found for fairly cheap as well. Anyways, now it's time to talk about the number one spot, which you probably narrowed it down, but let's get to it. And, in my opinion, both my favorite and, in my opinion, the best of the PS2 Dragon Ball Z games is, again, you probably narrowed it down, but it's Tenkaichi 3. Now, yeah, I know a lot of people say this is the best Dragon Ball game in general, and yeah, I honestly just really, I pretty much agree with what they say. Do I think it's single-handedly beats the shit out of every other Dragon Ball game? No, but I think it's a very, very solid fighter and a very, very solid Dragon Ball game. Well, obviously, well, first let's start with the positive. I do have a couple negatives, but it's not a whole lot, but let's start off with the positives. There is a fuck ton of characters to choose from in this game. Probably the most characters out of any fighting game ever, pretty much. And, yeah, I personally like playing a lot of the characters. And, again, I just like having more mix-ups and more characters to play with in a fighting game. Another positive aspect of this game is it's even better gameplay-wise than Tenkaichi 2. It did add some, well, it did refine a lot, well, it did tweak stuff from Budokai Tenkaichi 2, but I just think it plays more fluid, and I think it's overall just more fun. The gameplay is more fun in Tenkaichi 3 than in Tenkaichi 2, and, yeah, another aspect I liked about the game was the soundtrack, which I do agree that Tenkaichi 2 does have a better soundtrack, but Tenkaichi 3 was still pretty solid music-wise as well. I like the really fast-paced stuff in the fast-pacedness in the song, and in the soundtrack, sorry. And another aspect I love about this game is there's surprisingly a lot of content to do, or a lot of stuff to do in the game, particularly in terms of the modes. Like, it brings back to the ultimate, well, I kind of just completely skimmed over Ultimate Battle Z from Tenkaichi 2, but yeah, they bring back another kind of similar mode in this one, which you could actually transfer Ultimate Battle and Ultimate Battle Z from Tenkaichi 1 and 2 over to this one on the PS2 version, but yeah, I thought that was a cool aspect, and again, into Ultimate Battle is pretty much the best part of Tenkaichi 1 to begin with, so pretty much having this one in Tenkaichi 3 and a lot of different fights to choose from, I think it's pretty cool. And I know I criticized the World Tournament mode in the Budokai 3 segment, but I actually like the way they handle the tournament modes in this one, because it's not just one tournament you could play in Tenkaichi 3. You actually have quite a bit of ones. Now, there is a difference between, like, the regular tournaments and the free tournaments. Free tournament is pretty much just, well, it's actually what it says. You just set up the options you want, or you set up the difficulties and other stuff, and yeah, I think that's cool, but you can't really earn anything in it, so it's not a whole lot of reason to do it. But one thing I like about the tournament modes is, again, it's not just the World Tournament. It also dips its feet into the other tournament modes, like the Cell Games and other World Tournament, which I think those are better because they take out the one aspect that held back the World Tournament mode, in my opinion, that being the renouts. And yeah, they're pretty much like standard arcade modes, pretty much. And yeah, there's also a lot of other stuff that I could go into, but again, it's a lot. But yeah, and now on to kind of the negative aspects of this game. Well, you could consider this half positive, half negative, but I do think the story mode did take a bit of a downfall from Tenkaichi 2. Now, I like the structure of it. It's kind of like Budokai 1 and Tenkaichi 1, for example. You know, fight after fight after fight. And I like that aspect. And I do kind of like the what-if aspects where, yeah, you actually have to push the R3 stick to progress through the cutscenes and stuff. But, yeah, for some of them, you can just do what-ifs, which I think is kind of cool. But they cut out quite a bit from Tenkaichi 2 story mode, and by that I mean they don't really cover everything, but It's not a bad story mode necessarily, but again, I do think it was a bit of a downfall from the second game to the third game. But that's all I really have to say negatively about Tenkaichi 3. I think it's a very solid game, although, to be honest, pretty much all four of the ones in the top four I'd suggest getting, or maybe just get an emulator, because some of these are pretty pricey, like Tenkaichi 3 especially. This game goes for about like $60 to $100 or more on Amazon and eBay, so I'd suggest getting an emulator for these games. But yeah, anyways, I am the Perpetuating Party of Patriots, and see you guys in the next video.